First contact fumble. The warning lights in laboratory module 7 flashed amber for the third time that cycle, and Dr. Sarah Chen was officially out of patience. She watched as her alien colleagues scattered in their usual panic, their crystalline appendages clicking against the metal floor as they evacuated the lab. Again. "It's just the environmental sensors," she called after them. But the vaccines were already gone, their translucent bodies disappearing around the corridor bend. Sarah sighed and turned back to her workstation, where bacterial cultures from 11 different worlds sat waiting for analysis. The station's automated voice echoed through the chamber. "Warning. Anomalous particle detection in laboratory module 7. Please evacuate until decontamination procedures are complete. Override warning protocol. Authorization. Chen Alpha 9. Sarah commanded. The lights continued flashing. She tried again. Nothing. Chief Administrator Ixel's message arrived moments later, their holographic form materializing beside her workstation. The vaccine's crystalline body refracted the warning lights, sending amber patterns dancing across the lab walls. "Dr. Chen, you are once again failing to follow safety protocols." Ixel's translated voice carried the particular tone of exasperation she'd grown familiar with over the past year as Station Helios' only human researcher. "And you're once again overreacting to standard background radiation fluctuations," Sarah replied, not looking up from her microscope. "These sensors were calibrated for vaccine biological safety standards. They're far too sensitive for practical research conditions. Our standards exist for good reason, Doctor. We've been detecting unusual energy signatures throughout this sector for the past 3 cycles. The safety of all station personnel is paramount." Sarah finally looked up. "Energy signatures? What kind?" "That information is classified until we complete our investigation. Please evacuate the laboratory." "Classified?" Sarah fought to keep her voice level. "I'm the station's leading xenobiologist. If there's something potentially biological causing these readings, I should be involved in the investigation." Ixel's crystalline form shifted in what Sarah had learned was their species' equivalent of uncomfortable fidgeting. "This is an internal security matter. Your expertise, while valuable in other contexts, is not required here." Sarah stood, crossing her arms. "Let me guess. You've been detecting these signatures for weeks, probably coinciding with the increased sensor alerts. You've run every standard scan in the database and found nothing concrete. And now you're starting to worry that whatever's causing this might be alive, but in a way your sensors aren't designed to recognize." The administrator's silence was answer enough. "I've reviewed every sensor log from the past month," Sarah continued. "The pattern isn't random. There's intelligence behind it. Communication attempts, maybe, but you'd need human pattern recognition capabilities to see it. Dr. Chen, I must insist. Check the maintenance logs against the sensor alerts," Sarah interrupted. "Cross-reference them with station power fluctuations and temperature variations. There's something here that wants to be found, but not by conventional means." She pulled up her own analysis on the lab's main display. "Look at this. It's not random noise. It's a pattern." Ixel moved closer to the display, their crystalline body refracting light in complex patterns that Sarah had learned indicated intense focus. "This is concerning. But what could possibly?" The lights flickered, and every display in the lab activated simultaneously. Streams of data flowed across the screens, not in any language Sarah recognized, but in elegant mathematical sequences that made her breath catch. "Still think this is just a security issue?" she asked quietly. Ixel's translation unit was silent for a long moment. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, Doctor. Bring your analysis." As Sarah gathered her data tablets, she smiled slightly. Sometimes it took a human perspective to see what was hiding in plain sight. The real question was, what exactly were they trying to communicate with? The lights flickered again as she left the lab, and Sarah could have sworn they pulsed in a pattern that matched her heartbeat. Pattern recognition. "These readings are impossible," Administrator Ixel declared, their crystalline form casting prismatic shadows across the holograms floating between them. The secure conference room was filled with senior Vaxian scientists, their translucent bodies arranged in what Sarah recognized as their species' formal configuration. Sarah leaned forward, tapping commands into her data tablet. Not impossible, just unexpected. Look at how the energy signatures cluster around our neural network nodes. Whatever this is, it's trying to interface with our systems. That would require an intelligence capable of understanding and manipulating quantum states, objected Chief Scientist Nix, their crystalline appendages clicking in agitation. No known species has achieved such capabilities. No known organic species, Sarah corrected. But what if we're dealing with something that exists primarily in quantum states? Something that perceives reality fundamentally differently than we do. The room erupted in overlapping translations as the Vaxian scientists argued. Sarah waited patiently, watching the data streams flowing across her tablet. There, another pattern, almost too subtle to notice. She quickly recorded it. Even if such a being existed, Ixel finally said, restoring order to the chamber, how could it have entered our station? Our quarantine protocols are absolute. Sarah stood and walked to the main holographic display. Permission to access the station's historical data. At Ixel's reluctant gesture of assent, she pulled up the construction records. Station Helios was built using materials mined from asteroid belt KC 847, correct? Correct, Nix confirmed. The highest quality quantum-stabilized metals available. And when did these unusual readings begin? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. She highlighted a date on the timeline. 3 cycles after we activated the new quantum processing core, Ixel admitted. But surely you're not suggesting. I'm suggesting that whatever we're dealing with was already here, dormant in the quantum structures of the metal itself. When we activated the processing core, we essentially woke it up. Sarah displayed her latest pattern analysis. Look at these sequences. They're not random. They're evolving, becoming more complex. It's learning our systems, trying to find a way to communicate. The Vaxian's crystalline bodies shifted in waves of color that Sarah's translator rendered as deep concern. If this is true, Ixel said slowly, then we have inadvertently imprisoned a sentient being within our station's infrastructure. Not imprisoned, Sarah corrected. We've given it a medium through which it can finally reach out. But our standard protocols aren't designed to recognize or interpret its attempts at communication. We need to think beyond conventional parameters. And I suppose you have a suggestion. Nix's tone carried skepticism, but Sarah detected genuine curiosity beneath it. She smiled, pulling up her prototype interface design. Actually, I do. These beings exist in quantum states, right? So let's stop trying to force them to communicate in classical terms. Instead of interpreting their signals as data, what if we treated them as probability waves? The hologram shifted, showing her theoretical model. The seemingly random energy fluctuations transformed into complex, interconnected patterns, like a neural network, but operating on quantum principles. Impossible, one of the junior scientists declared. The processing power required to interpret quantum signals in real time would exceed our core's capabilities. Using conventional methods, yes, Sarah agreed. But human brains are actually quite good at recognizing patterns in probability spaces. We do it unconsciously all the time. We just need to create an interface that translates quantum states into something our minds can naturally interpret. She activated the prototype. The conference room's lights dimmed, and the air filled with shifting, ethereal patterns of light and shadow. The Vaxians drew back, their crystalline bodies resonating with what Sarah's translator interpreted as a mixture of fear and awe. There, Sarah said softly, pointing to a recurring spiral of light that pulsed in time with the station's power fluctuations. That's not random. That's language. We just needed to learn how to see it. The pattern shifted, becoming more defined, more deliberate. Sarah felt her heart race as she realized what she was seeing. The quantum beings weren't just trying to communicate. They were trying to show them something. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about consciousness, intelligence, and the fundamental nature of life itself. Now she just had to convince the Vaxian High Council to let her prove it. The hidden intelligence. The High Council has rejected your proposal, Ixal announced, their crystalline form dulled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as resignation. They're sending a containment team instead, arrival estimated in 6 cycles. Sarah continued adjusting her interface equipment, her fingers flying over the controls. 6 cycles is plenty of time. Look at this. She gestured to the quantum visualization floating above her workstation. The patterns are becoming more organized. They're learning. Ixal. The administrator moved closer, their form refracting the ethereal light patterns. Even if you're right, the Council considers quantum state beings too dangerous to interact with. The containment team will purge the station systems and replace the quantum core. Purge the... Sarah's hands froze over the controls. That would kill them. You can't just destroy a sentient species because you're afraid of them. We're not destroying them. We're protecting ourselves from a potential threat. By committing genocide. Sarah stood, facing the administrator. These beings have shown no hostile intent. They've been trying to communicate with us from the moment they awakened. If we could just... The station lights flickered, and the quantum visualization erupted in a dazzling display of interconnected patterns. Sarah's prototype interface hummed to life, projecting shifting geometries that made Ixal step back in alarm. They're responding to our conversation, Sarah said softly. They understand us. Look at the pattern complexity. It's increasing exponentially. Through the interface, Sarah watched as the quantum patterns began to coalesce into recognizable shapes. Not physical objects, but representations of concepts. Mathematical constants, atomic structures, the fundamental forces that govern the universe. They're not just showing us random data, she breathed. They're showing us how they see reality. Their entire physics model is based on quantum probability states rather than classical mechanics. Ixal's crystalline form vibrated with uncertainty. The Council won't accept theoretical physics as proof of sentience. Then let's give them something they can't ignore. Sarah's fingers danced over the controls, modifying the interface parameters. If they perceive reality as probability waves, then we need to think in probabilities too. Not just binary yes/no decisions, but all possible states simultaneously. The visualization shifted, becoming more fluid, more organic. The quantum beings responded immediately, their patterns adapting to match the new interface paradigm. Sarah felt a surge of excitement as she recognized emerging structures in the chaos. There, she pointed to a recurring sequence. That's not just pattern matching. They're extrapolating, creating new mathematical concepts by combining our physics models with theirs. This is original thought, Ixal. Creative intelligence. The administrator moved closer, their crystalline structure resonating with the quantum frequencies. How is this possible? Our best scientists couldn't detect any sign of organized consciousness. Because you were looking for consciousness that resembles your own, Sarah explained, adjusting the visualization. But intelligence doesn't have to follow our rules. These beings exist in a state of quantum superposition. They can consider multiple possibilities simultaneously, see all potential outcomes at once. The pattern swirled faster, more urgently. Sarah's interface began translating the quantum signals into a crude form of symbolic language. Not words exactly, but concepts rendered in geometric forms. They're trying to warn us about something, she realized, studying the repeating symbols. Something about the station's quantum core. The containment team's purge protocols could have unintended consequences they don't understand. Ixal's form shifted in alarm. What kind of consequences? I'm not sure yet. The concepts they're showing us don't have direct translations. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, trying to refine the interface. But they're not just trying to save themselves. They're trying to prevent some kind of quantum cascade effect that could. She trailed off as the implications became clear. The quantum beings weren't parasites or invaders. They were guardians, maintaining crucial quantum stability in the very fabric of the station's structure. Removing them wouldn't just be genocide. It could tear apart the quantum fields holding the station together. Now she just had to prove it before the containment team arrived. And to do that, she'd need to achieve something no human or vaccine had ever done before: establish direct communication with a quantum consciousness. The station lights pulsed in what Sarah could have sworn was encouragement. At least someone believed she could do it. Translation breakthrough. The quantum visualization chamber hummed with energy as Sarah made her final adjustments. She'd converted the entire lab into an immersive interface, surrounding herself with shifting patterns of probability waves that the quantum beings use to communicate. "The containment team has entered the system," Ixel announced from the doorway. "2 cycles until arrival." Sarah nodded without looking up from her work. "Then we better make this count." She activated the new neural interface she'd cobbled together from modified sensor arrays and spare quantum processors. "How did you convince the council to give us more time?" "I showed them your data on quantum field stability." Ixel's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been embarrassment. "And I may have implied that rushing the containment process could destabilize the station's structural integrity." "Well, you're not wrong." Sarah smiled grimly. "Ready to make history, or possibly get us both stripped of our credentials. I believe the human phrase is in for a penny, in for a pound." Sarah laughed despite herself. "You've been studying Earth idioms again." She took a deep breath and activated the neural interface. The world transformed around her. The quantum visualization wasn't just showing patterns anymore. She was inside them, surrounded by cascading waves of probability and potential. The quantum being's consciousness surrounded her, not as discrete entities, but as overlapping fields of possibility. "Hello," she thought, projecting the concept into the quantum field. "I am Sarah. We want to understand." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Patterns exploded around her, too complex to follow. Sarah forced herself to remain calm, remembering her training in pattern recognition. Don't try to understand everything at once. Look for the recurring elements, the basic building blocks of communication. "Slower, please," she projected. "Show me one concept at a time." The chaos resolved into simpler patterns. She recognized mathematical constants, then more complex physics concepts. The beings were establishing a baseline vocabulary, building from fundamental principles to more abstract ideas. "They're teaching me their language," she said aloud for Ixel's benefit. "But it's not just symbols or sounds. They communicate in pure concepts, probability states that represent potential meanings." Through the interface, she began to grasp how the quantum beings perceived reality. They existed in all possible states simultaneously, their consciousness spread across probability waves. What humans saw as solid matter, they experienced as clouds of quantum potential. The station itself wasn't just a structure to them, but a vast network of quantum fields they helped maintain and stabilize. The containment team's purge protocols, Sarah realized with growing horror. They wouldn't just kill the beings, they'd collapse all these quantum fields at once. The whole station could. A new pattern emerged in her vision, urgent and insistent. The quantum beings were showing her something about the station's core, about cascading probability waves and quantum entanglement chains. Sarah's mind raced to keep up with the implications. "Ixel," she called out, "I need you to transmit something to the containment team. Now." She began dictating a series of equations and diagrams, translating the quantum being's warning into classical physics terms. The beings helped, simplifying their concepts into forms her human mind could grasp and convey. "If they try to purge the quantum fields," she explained as she worked, "it won't just collapse local probability waves. The fields are too deeply entangled with the station's systems. It would trigger a cascade failure through all quantum-stabilized materials. The entire station would destabilize at the quantum level," Ixel realized. their crystalline form vibrating with alarm. Worse, the cascade could spread through quantum entanglement to other stations using the same technology. Every quantum core in the sector could collapse. The quantum beings pulsed agreement, sharing visions of spreading chaos through the probability fields. But they also showed something else, a solution, if only they could make the others understand in time. Sarah squared her shoulders, surrounded by the swirling quantum consciousness of beings who had chosen to help rather than harm, who had waited patiently for someone to recognize their attempts at communication. "Send the containment team our data," she told Ixel. "All of it. And inform the council that in one cycle, I'm going to prove these beings aren't a threat. They're the only thing standing between us and quantum chaos." The pattern swirled around her in what felt remarkably like approval. Now she just had to hope the council was willing to accept proof when they saw it, even if it came in a form they'd never expected to understand. Bridge between worlds. The containment team's sleek black ship hung motionless against the stars, its quantum purge systems powered down but ready. On Station Helios's main observation deck, Sarah stood before the assembled council representatives, her neural interface humming softly as it projected quantum visualization patterns into the air. "Distinguished council members," she began, "you're about to witness something unprecedented in the history of interspecies communication." The quantum beings swirled around them, their patterns more organized than ever before. Through weeks of interaction, they'd learned to modulate their quantum states in ways organic minds could better comprehend. Sarah's interface translated their complex probability waves into haunting geometrical forms that filled the chamber. "What you're seeing isn't just random energy," Sarah continued. "It's language, consciousness, a form of life that evolved in quantum states rather than classical matter." She gestured to the patterns. "And they've been helping us all along." The council members watched, their various physiologies displaying different signs of attention or skepticism. The Vaxian High Commissioner's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained energy. "Explain," they commanded. Sarah nodded to Ixel, who activated the station's diagnostic displays. "Every quantum-based system in this station requires constant field stabilization to function. We thought our quantum cores handled this automatically. But look at the underlying patterns." The displays showed wave after wave of subtle quantum adjustments, tiny corrections that kept probability fields aligned and stable. The quantum beings' patterns pulsed in sync with the data. "They're quantum engineers," Sarah explained. "They evolved to maintain natural quantum fields in their original asteroid habitat. When we built this station using quantum-stabilized materials from their home, they came with it. And they've been quietly maintaining our systems ever since. This is why our quantum cores are 30% more efficient than theoretical models predict," Ixel added. "We thought it was superior engineering. Instead, we had help we didn't even know about." A murmur went through the council members. The High Commissioner leaned forward, and the recent energy fluctuations. "They were trying to make contact," Sarah said. "Our activation of the new quantum core gave them more energy to work with, more ways to reach out. But they had to be careful not to disrupt station operations while they did it." She smiled. "They're very conscientious engineers." The quantum patterns swirled faster, forming complex mathematical proofs and engineering diagrams. Sarah's interface translated them into holographic models that hung in the air. Improvements to quantum field stability, new ways to handle probability cascade effects, even theoretical applications that made several council scientists gasp in surprise. "They're not just maintaining our systems," Sarah continued. "They want to help us improve them, to teach us things about quantum engineering that could take us centuries to discover on our own. All they ask in return is acknowledgement, recognition, the chance to communicate and cooperate openly instead of hiding in the quantum fields." The High Commissioner's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, thoughtful blue. "And you can prove these beings are truly sentient, that this isn't simply emergent behavior from quantum fluctuations." Sarah's smile widened. "Actually, they can prove it themselves. She adjusted her interface. They've learned enough about how our minds work to demonstrate consciousness in a way you'll understand. Watch. The quantum patterns consolidated, forming into a precise mathematical proof of self-awareness based on the Council's own theoretical frameworks for consciousness. But they didn't stop there. The beams expanded the proof, showing how consciousness could arise in quantum states, adding new theorems and implications that pushed the boundaries of existing theory. They're not just proving they're conscious, Sarah explained as the Council scientists frantically recorded the equations. They're helping us understand consciousness itself better, showing us how awareness can exist in forms we never imagined. The High Commissioner was silent for a long moment, their crystalline form refracting the quantum patterns in complex ways. Finally, they spoke. The containment mission is canceled. Dr. Chen, you will head a new joint research initiative to explore communication and cooperation with these quantum engineers. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Around her, the quantum being's patterns danced with what she'd learned to recognize as joy. Thank you, Commissioner. But I can't take all the credit. She gestured to the swirling patterns. They were patient enough to keep trying until someone finally noticed them. I just happened to be human enough to look past conventional assumptions and see what was really there. The patterns coalesced into a perfect model of the station, showing all its quantum fields working in harmony. In that moment, Sarah knew she was seeing the future, not just of human-alien cooperation, but of a new understanding of life and consciousness itself. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important discoveries came not from looking for specific answers, but from being willing to ask entirely new questions. And that, perhaps, was humanity's greatest strength of all.